The chirping of birds echoed throughout the silent forest, filling the air with a peaceful silence. Kiet walked along the narrow path, his footprints imprinted on the damp ground below. Each step seemed to slow his mind, causing him to think deeply. He couldn't help but think about Tu-Na and her child. What were they doing right now? Did she ever think about him? I wonder if Tu-Na still remembers me, he wondered, his eyes looking into the distance, lost in thought. The path eventually led him to a hill covered with rows of eucalyptus trees, tall and sturdy like sentinels guarding the forest. Kite stopped and looked up at the towering trunks. These trees must be about 5 years old, they're so big, he thought to himself as he watched their growth. He walked deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the canopy stretched above him, blocking most of the sunlight. The trunks grew larger and larger, reaching up to the sky. Kiet couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This was his work, and it was starting to pay off. The trees he was looking at now would be his livelihood. Large trees like this would make excellent planks for the sawmill, while the smaller ones could be used for firewood, he said aloud, nodding to himself as he remembered the potential of the land. His confidence grew with every step, the planning and business aspects all blending together in his mind. Coming to a particularly large eucalyptus tree, Kiet placed his hand on the rough bark, taking a moment to assess the strength and durability of the tree. The air was still, the forest peaceful. Suddenly, a rustling sound from behind startled him. He turned around to see a man in work clothes, his face covered in sweat from the heat. "Kiet, what are you going to do with this log?" the man asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Kiet looked at him and replied, "We need to check the quality first. If it's good, we can supply it to the lumber mills right away." The man nodded, his eyes still focused on the trees. "Do you need any help?" Kiet smiled and shook his head. "Thanks, but I'll handle it. I need to check the trees myself," he said, his gaze shifting back to the forest. "These trees are a valuable resource, but quality is key. We can't ignore that." The two men continued deeper into the forest, their footsteps soft on the forest floor. The chirping of birds in the trees provided a peaceful backdrop to their quiet conversation. As they walked, Kiet couldn't get the thoughts of Shuya out of his mind. There were so many things he still needed to resolve with her. So many unresolved feelings. It was hard to focus fully on the task at hand when his heart was still entangled in the past. The trees around them grew denser, their trunks towering as if they were witnesses to the passage of time. Kiet's mind drifted once more, wondering about his future with Tu-Na, about the life they could have had together if only things had been different. But he had no answers. The forest, with its peaceful silence, was a place where he could think and reflect, but also a place where he had to face his own uncertainties. As he continued down the path, Kiet knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened, he had to keep moving forward. He had a job to do and a life to build, but deep down, his heart still held hope. Hope for answers, for peace, and maybe, just maybe, a second chance with Tu-Na. The scene around Kiet felt more peaceful than ever before. As he was heading back to his workshop, his eyes suddenly stopped at the sight in front of him. There, standing near the entrance, was Tu-Na, holding a basket full of ripe jackfruit, with a little child in her arms. Kiet couldn't believe his eyes. He quickly ran up to her. "Tu-Na, where have you been?" Kiet asked, his voice filled with surprise and joy. Tu-Na turned around, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "I just went to the market to sell some jackfruit with the little one," she replied, her voice gentle as if it was nothing special. Kiet stood there, watching her for a moment. A wave of relief washed over him, and for the first time in a while, his heart felt lighter. Even though they had only just seen each other briefly, it was the moment he had been hoping for. It was a small encounter, but it eased the longing he had been carrying for so long. After saying goodbye to Tuna, Keet walked back to the workshop where Nam was still busy with the unfinished logs. He approached him, watched him work for a moment, and then asked, "How's it going today? Is it tough on you?" Nam turned around and smiled as soon as he saw Kayet. "Kia, you're here. It's not too bad today. Just a lot of work to get through." Kayet smiled back, nodding in understanding. Despite the long hours and hard work, he found these moments of camaraderie with Nam to be comforting. It was a reminder of the bond they shared, even in the midst of a tough day. Just as Kayet was about to leave, he heard Nam's voice calling out after him. "Hey, Kayet, hold on a sec. I saw you talking to that girl earlier. Is she your girlfriend?" Kayet paused, a bit caught off guard. His face flushed slightly as he hesitated before answering, his mind racing. "Yeah, she's just a friend of mine," he said, though there was a small hint of unease in his tone. In his heart, he wondered what Nam might think. Nam continued to look at him with curiosity, clearly not satisfied with that answer. "But I notice she has a kid. Aren't you worried about her ex-husband?" Kayet gave a soft chuckle, keeping his composure. He met Nam's gaze and replied calmly, "Her ex-husband left her a long time ago. Don't worry about it, just keep working, all right? I've got some things to take care of." His voice was steady, but inside, Keet couldn't help but feel a bit unsettled. Nam's question had stirred something in him, making him reflect on the past, though he tried not to let it show. He didn't want to get too caught up in old worries. Nam gave a nod, though he still seemed a little curious. He didn't push the conversation further. Keet turned and walked away, but even as he stepped out of the workshop, his thoughts lingered. Nam's question had opened a door to a part of his past he had been avoiding. But Keet couldn't afford to dwell on it too much. He had work to do and relationships that needed his attention. As he walked away, his mind drifted back to Tuna. Despite the unresolved feelings, he couldn't ignore the small but significant moments they shared. It reminded him that some things were worth holding on to, even if it meant facing uncertainties about the future. For now, though, he knew he had to keep moving forward, both in his work and in his personal life, wherever that might lead him. As Keet left the workshop, the sun was beginning to set. He walked down the narrow path feeling lighter after his conversation with Nam. His mind was a bit more at ease, but there was still something pulling at him. When he reached Tuna's small, cozy house, he was immediately hit with the comforting scent of ripe jackfruit wafting through the air. It made him feel a warmth that spread through his whole body, a feeling he couldn't quite describe. Inside, Tuna was busy in the kitchen. She gently laid her daughter down on the bed, then hurried into the kitchen to prepare some food. She had bought some peanuts at the market earlier that day, and as she worked, her thoughts drifted to Keet. "He's coming over soon. I think I'll make him some chai," she thought to herself, the idea making her smile. Her hands moved quickly as she prepared the meal, skillfully turning the sweet jackfruit into a delicious dish. She smiled to herself, imagining how Keet would react when he tasted it. The peanuts were ready, and she was about to take them outside when she realized Keet was already sitting at the small bamboo table waiting for her. He was taking in the surroundings, the air filled with the sweet aroma of the jackfruit. The peacefulness of the little house with its simple charm seemed to offer him a sense of calm that he hadn't known he needed. Tuna stepped out, her bright smile greeting him. "Here, eat up. Today you're going to get a taste of my cooking," she said, placing the bowl of che in front of him. Kite looked up at her, his eyes full of appreciation. "This is really good. You're really talented," he said, his voice warm with admiration. They shared a smile, and the sound of their laughter filled the space, creating a lightness in the air. The atmosphere was suddenly warmer and more inviting, a contrast to the outside world where the sun was fading away. A few moments later, Kiet couldn't help but feel the gentle touch of Tuna's hand on his cheek as she laughed softly. It was such a small, simple gesture, but it carried so much meaning. Kiet's heart swelled, and he realized just how deep his feelings for Tuna had grown. It wasn't just the meal or the laughter that made this moment special. It was the quiet connection between them, one that was starting to feel undeniable. Outside, the rain began to fall, light droplets tapping against the roof. The peaceful sound of the rain only added to the tranquility of the moment. Tuna looked at Kiet, a playful glint in her eyes. "Why don't you stay for dinner with me and my daughter?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. Kiet hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. But when he looked into her eyes, he knew he couldn't say no. He smiled, a little shy but happy. "All right, I don't have anywhere else to be," he said. Tuna's face lit up, her eyes sparkling with delight. She had prepared a simple dinner, but with all the love and warmth she could muster, it turned into something extraordinary. They sat together, eating and talking, the conversation flowing easily between them. The gentle rain outside seemed to bring them closer, making the evening feel even more intimate and special. The rain outside continued to fall softly, and inside the little house, Kiet felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The connection he shared with Tuna was growing stronger with every passing moment. As they laughed and talked, he knew this was a moment he'd remember, one that felt like the beginning of something new.